Hola, bienvenidos. Hello, I'm Melia Bensussen. Honored to be artistic director here at Hartford Stage. Welcome back to Seen and Heard. This is our third episode of this, our 24-25 season. I am thrilled to be here for the return of the extraordinary American playwright August Wilson to Hartford Stage. So I am joined by three of the key collaborators on a play called Two Trains Running. So this extraordinary American playwright, who you'll hear more about from smarter people than me in just a moment, that is the three of you, so just be prepared, chronicled his experience, the African-American experience, the American experience, really, to put it in the boldest, clearest terms, through an extraordinary series of plays, 10 plays. This is the 7th. It takes place in the 60s. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I am joined by three wonderful people, two of our cast members. So we have Godfrey Simmons and Taji Senior here with us, as well as the wonderful director, Gilbert McCauley. So I welcome you brilliant humans. We are in the best place in the world because we're in our rehearsal room at Hartford Stage. So this, and it's set up, Dan, can you follow me if I do this? We're here in the diner. We've never invited Seen and Heard audiences into our rehearsal room.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah, so this is really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay. So we have our tables, we have our counter. Taji, I think you're probably really busy in this area. You can see, I don't know if Dan can sort of take the camera over to all the plates and cups. There's all sorts of props here. Joe, our extraordinary props designer and director here at Hartford Stage, makes sure the room is equipped. We're in the midst of rehearsals here. We start tech next week. Don't be afraid. Right? We're going to be ready. And performances start the week after that. I have to check the dates because I get confused about dates. And you know, they're on my last card.
First preview is 23rd. Yes, we know. First preview is January 23rd.
First preview is January 23rd.
And then we open on the 31st.
So that means we start performances in 2 weeks.
Yes.
And it's going to rock. It's going to be really an amazing, amazing show. This is a play I love very, very much, and really honored to bring August Wilson back to Hartford Stage with the three of you in this room. I'm going to throw out some questions. You all know what this audience wants to hear is why this play now and what's exciting for them to come see it. And I would just, Gilbert, if I can start with you, if you had to say, and clearly I am making you say, what is Two Trains Running about in brief to you? Because it's about a million things, so I don't mean...
I think that's the thing. I mean, it's about so many things. It's kind of about, at its heart, this thing around urban renewal, which was sometimes called, Negro removal back in those days in Pittsburgh.
Right, we should say all these plays take place in Pittsburgh.
All these plays take place in Pittsburgh.
And this is a diner in Pittsburgh.
And it's 1969.
And it's 1969 in this diner. Oh, there's the board, the wonderful chalkboard that's crucial in the plot.
And so it's about that. It's about getting what's coming to you. Yeah. It's about what do you do when you don't get what you think you deserve?
Or what you do deserve.
Or what you do, what you deserve. It's about that as well. It's about, on some levels, it's about reparations, and also it's about Sankofa, this idea of like going back to get things that in order to move forward. So Mr. Wilson has packed a lot of stuff into the piece, which for me makes it more rich because there's more for us to kind of investigate as as artists.
Right. It's wonderful. Can I ask you something rather private here on camera?
Yeah.
But could you share what your dad used to say to people?
Well, no, it was so. It was
Is that all right?
Yeah, no, I will. I
just,
will.
And
So,
I'm sorry we
no,
lost your dad.
Yeah. So coming into it, it is interesting that, like, so my dad used to. He kind of picked this up. He worked at the post office after he got out of the Air Force, and he worked at the post office. And so there was a guy who started it, and my dad just kept it going, which was when people would leave, at the end of the day, he said, "Hey, take it easy. Hope you get what's coming to you." And my dad, was like, in a way, it's kind of, it's funny because you can take that either way.
I love it for that reason,
That's
right?
like,
love that.
And so he kept it going, and he would, he talked about that in his life, and that whole idea of like getting what's coming to you, it's in a way very kind of personal for each person, because it's like, what do you got coming to you?
It's a little about your karma, though.
It's a little bit about your karma. It's a little bit about like what you're expecting. So it's all those things. I hope you get what's coming to you, but it makes you think. And I think that's what I like about it, because in a way, I feel like the play does the same thing. It's like it kind of makes you think about what you got, about this issue of what you got coming to you, but it's also about about worth, about what we are worthy of, and when you think about what you got coming to you, it does make you think about what you're worthy of, and about this notion of like worth, what's my value, and so Mr. Wilson does this wonderful thing of having this group of everyday people who are going in and out of this diner.
Of this very space.
Who are wrestling with this thing about trying to get what they have coming to them.
Thank you. I just love that connection between your dad and this place. So thank you. Taji, you live in this, your character. Tell us about your character and this diner, this physical space.
Yeah, so Risa is the only woman in the play who shows up on stage. There are many women in the play when you listen to the language of it, but she's the one who shows up on stage. And Gilbert and I were having a conversation earlier this week where I realized that for Risa, she's among that first generation of Black women who are working outside of the home, who are not doing domestic work.
Oh, that's I hadn't thought about that.
In 1969, so her mother, her grandmother, there's a real possibility that her grandmother could have been enslaved or born into enslavement, and then her mother probably was a domestic worker or working around at Whelm. So she's a young woman going out into the world in a way that she is not seeing modeled for her. Like, not to say that there aren't Black women out in the world, but not in this particular way. She's really entering the workforce in a particular way. And I think she takes a lot of pride in being given that responsibility. I think she takes her work very seriously. I think she takes herself very seriously. And while Memphis is the owner, Risa really sort of is like the executor of his vision. And I think that that's a thing she sort of clings to, and it is very important to her. In that when we start the play, she is standing on the precipice of losing because, of, not to give anything away, but there's this idea of urban renewal.
The neighborhood's changing.
The neighborhood's changing.
Things are up for sale.
Yeah.
Right? And this has been a diner that's been operational for how long when the play begins?
Well, I think it was operational before
you took
Memphis
it over.
gets it, but Memphis gets it, 8 years
8, 9 years, yeah.
before the play begins.
Yep.
And, and he just got that. He got that kind of by chance in terms of he hit the numbers and invested wisely. He bought a building and kind of started the business. But I think the diner was around before, and he kind of but he bought it.
It is sort of the story that we hear in different channels, in different narratives of a neighborhood. I'm thinking of the Heaven and Earth grocery store, that wonderful novel,
beautiful.
Or even, just how neighborhoods change. And then August Wilson was so, again, the poetry of Wilson sort of hitting this moment of this neighborhood place, right, where all the stories and people's vulnerabilities and cares are aired.
Well, it's also how the urban renewal is. It's how all that stuff is personal. It's really personalized for the people who are really affected. Because I don't know that you really see that much about who who it affects and how it affects on like a micro level, and at the same time, how that connects to the legacy of where people come
People's
from.
Stories
People's
and
stories.
how they're impacted by.
You can't. What does Holloway says? You can't separate yourself.
You can't separate yourself from the people.
Yeah.
And I think it's also because it's 1969. It is a time when August Wilson was coming into his own as a young man, as a writer, as a radicalized black man living in the United States. And so all of those things were coming together for him in the real 1969. So later on in 1990s.
So he writes this in the 90s.
He writes this in the 90s, but it's about 69, which is about a very important time for him.
And he was there in 69.
And he was there in 69, yeah. So he hadn't left Pittsburgh yet. So he was there.
Yeah.
He was there and going through this. And as it states in the play, this movement to move people out of the lower Hill District, which is where this is all happening, had been going on since for about 20 years. This is like the 50s, so that this thing has been happening already, and it did affect his life. It did affect, folks who got moved out before the play actually happens, and so things have been deteriorating already. And we were talking about this earlier, is that the Hill District had this. It had its own kind of culture. It was a very rich and diverse place, and so there's this thought that this is going to continue. But in order to bring in, I think, a civic center or something, whatever it is, that they start this thing back in the late 40s, really, to kind of start this movement to move people out so they can make way for this change that they think is good for the city without really considering about what's happening to the everyday people.
So it's the thing of it's great for humanity, but not so good for the folk.
Yeah. The humans got overlooked, but the humanity
is being served,
gonna do well,
but the people, sorry.
Yeah.
Tell me about the title, right? What does the title say to us? Two Trains Running. What does it say to each of you? And I know there's a poetry in all of it.
Right, it's a line Memphis says, you got their two trains running to get back to his home. So that's the literal thing, is that there's two trains. I can take one train. I also think that there's the idea is that there are two trains running. You got, there's like love and there's death. Mm-hmm. Those are
so you've got the literal and the metaphorical, right?
And then I think it's so many other things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many, connections, right?
It's from an old blues song also. Mr. Wilson was very much into the blues, and so there's that old there's the blues song, Two Trains Running. And so it's that's one part of it. But yes, like you said, there's that aspect of it. There's the fact that, Mr. Wilson even said, in the play, one character who says, it's about love and death, but also Mr. Wilson says there's two trains running. It's life and death, and everybody has to ride that train. And so I think in that way, it's like.
So you're writing one towards more life and one towards dying?
They're both running all the time. So they're all
running all the time.
You have to deal with that. But it's about how people ride that train, which is really what I think Mr. Wilson does a good job of, is elevating the lives of those people who are on that train and allowing us to see, just the real depth of them. Because like you said, when Mr. Wilson is dealing with that the whole thing about the cycle is dealing with a body of people who were, before the cycle starts, were considered 2/5 of human. And so he's trying to really focus on elevating those lives, because prior to the first play that he writes, we aren't viewed as fully human. And so it's about really picturing and capturing the fullness of our humanity on stage, as we deal with stuff like everybody else has to deal with. So it's not like, they're somehow different. No, we have to deal with the same things. It's just we have to deal with them in different ways, and they affect us in different ways. So there were a lot of people who were affected by what happened on the Hill, but it's just like he's saying, hey, let's look at these people, because let's look at this group of folks who are not monolithic. Let's look at them and
All these different stories
different
within,
kinds
right?
of stories, right, and see it. So that's what I think is really kind of powerful about it.
I'm so moved by what you're saying, because if you think about the goal of art to elevate the human spirit, but here is this goal of this poet, this artist, to take one particular group and through these extraordinary plays elevate them in a country where, as you say, right, historically, they hadn't been treated.
They had
in
not
this
been treated.
way.
Yeah, they
So
hadn't
we
been treated.
hadn't been the journey. The poetry of the play, the poetry of Wilson's writing, to me, I mean, we've said, you and I, in different ways, that he's an American Shakespeare.
Yes.
That there is the breath and the rhythm and the really, I lack for language, but the poetry of his prose, right? Because he's not writing strictly he's not writing in a pentameter, he's not writing in verse.
Well,
but okay, tell us about the
No,
language.
no. I'm just gonna say, like,
Tell us,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong.
But I might
It's a
be
yes
wrong.
and.
It's-
No. What I mean is that, like, I've been going through the.
You're learning it now.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, he has a lot of words in this play. And you know, we joke that audiences often say to actors in talkbacks,
Right.
how do you remember all the lines? I gotta say, on this play, I have the same question.
I'm still working. We're working. But what I've noted, I've been clocking it more and more as you've been talking about it, and I've been really noting it, that, like, there are lines that are literally, and I'm sure it's intentional.
I did
intentional.
hear.
They
I did
literally
hear through
are.
one of the rehearsal reports how much Godfrey's trying to be letter perfect. That he does it like.
Oh, I didn't say it. No, I didn't say it. No, it wasn't me. I didn't tell you.
No, in the best sense, right? Of, like, as artistic director, you try to keep track on what's going on.
But
in
you
spaces.
do want that. I mean, because I think that
I agree.
he's doing it. It's like Mr. Wilson did do it on purpose. And when you read about kind of his journey as a playwright, he started out as someone
As
who
a
was a poet,
right.
who then tried to write plays. And his initial plays, people weren't successful because they were too poetic. And so what he started doing
That's
was trying to
interesting.
listen to people and hear the poetry of what they were saying rather than putting his poetry into it. Like, we're hearing the poetry that they were coming up with. And so what he did was to really, in a way, kind of chronicle the poetry that is in the language, the way, we're talking about the elegance, but when you think about elegance of the language, it's to achieve the maximum effect with the least amount of effort. And that's the way the speech does. And that's because it's a part of the culture. There are things that people say that do reflect that. We were talking about the different kind of phrases that we have that show that, and Mr. Wilson was great about capturing that and putting it into the plays, and that, I think, is what elevated his work, but then also, like I said, does a lot to elevate the human.
And I think the thing about the poetry of it, the beautiful thing of it and the gift of it as an actor is that it demands a kind of rigor and a kind of craftsmanship.
Yep.
And because it is working across discipline, like one of my favorite quotes that I've ever heard a musician say is, technique doesn't mean speed, it means ease.
Yeah.
Ooh, nice.
And so we are in this space right now.
You're being
in the
jazz musicians.
in the room, we're really efforting towards making it look easy, but in order to do that, we have to put in some real work and some real
grind
rigor.
before you get
there. And there are times when I'm like, when something is off because you can't hear the music of it, or you hear like the note is wrong. And so maybe it's not perfect iambic pentameter, but there are lines where I'm counting syllables like
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There is straight up iambic pentameter.
poetic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's beautiful. It is music. I mean, I've had the privilege to listen to these actors, just even reading the play early on. And there's nothing, it's like Shakespeare. You read it on the page, it's one thing. To hear your voices and the melody it makes is an entirely different experience, right? You can't just read August Wilson. You need to hear it. You need to see it. This is, granted, it's the rehearsal hall, but we are going to be creating in our wonderful Thrust Theater a complete feel of a mid-century diner, right? Lawrence's set is amazing.
It is.
We have the model right there, so maybe we can, at the end of Seen and Heard, maybe get a shot. So stay tuned for the end of this. We'll make sure we get a picture of the model. But what do you think a mid-century diner and a play that's set in 1969, how does that speak to today's audience, right? This combination of really, you enter this theater and you'll feel like you're in this diner, I think. Don't you? I think it's what you've done, which is so, you and Lawrence have done such a wonderful job. The tables go right almost to the seats. In fact, I'll do a little plug. We're gonna have a special event. You guys know this, after closing, there's going to be a dinner on the set. After closing.
Yes, okay.
So stay tuned for news and
love
back,
it.
because it's just going to be so complete. But how do you think an audience today responds to both the mid-century diner feeling and a play that is really set, as you were saying, in this very particular political moment of the United States of 1969?
No. I was going to say, there's this, when you say mid-century, there's a certain nostalgia about mid-century. When people hear that word, it's just like, oh, wasn't that cool?
Isn't that great?
That is great. It's
Father
like,
Knows Best.
This is
that
awesome. That might be a little early, but still, it's mid-century. 50 to like 70s, right? Like, it's like, oh yeah, this is nice or whatever. But no one's thinking about, like, you know, the decay that is coming. No one's thinking about the ramp up of the real kind of mendacity that governments, city governments and state governments are really kind of exacting on, enacting on people of color, bodies of culture, across the board.
This gentrification thing. And
I'm sure Dodger Stadium was.
Cities.
I'm sure Dodger Stadium out in L.A. is Chavez Ravine. I'm sure that was mid-century, right? I'm sure that was around, a little earlier than that, right? When they came over from Brooklyn, right? I mean, there's all those, right? All big Mexican American population out there, just gutted. Stuff just happening here in terms of just like urban renewal. I don't even know if you could call it urban renewal. I'm thinking about like the stadium, like all that. Like,
so the sort of sense of transformation that maybe we have this fantasy of 50s, 60s. Of a kind of ease.
A kind of ease and excitement and like psychedelia and
I think for when I talked to Lawrence about it, what I was trying to get
Lawrence is our set designer.
Lawrence, as our set designer, was that it wasn't so much, there is that way that all that the destruction and kind of transformation of this community is happening outside these walls, but Memphis's space becomes kind of like...
This is Memphis, who's the owner of the diner.
The owner of the diner. His space becomes kind of like this refuge for people in who are dealing with that, what's happening out there. And so, what makes this space is the fact that it is a sanctuary in a way from all of that to some degree, but people are bringing it into this space. They are bringing it into this space and trying to, wrestle with it, get it off of them, whatever, in this place. But Memphis is, because it is one of the last few businesses in the area, it does become this kind of refuge.
It's a sanctuary.
Right?
Yeah. I think of some of what you two do in the play as the only server, really the manager, the sole voice, and the owner in terms of how you take care of people in the neighborhood.
That's what I was gonna say too. Like, I think the thing that is like legible or will be legible to a modern audience is that immediate understanding of community and that immediate understanding of like what it means to share space with another person. I think it's really easy to like exist in our own, it is becoming increasingly easy because it benefits the interests of capitalism for us to remain in our own silos, to remain on our own, to remain separated from one another. But I think coming into a theater, any theater, to see any show is an agreement, right? Like, I am here to tell you a story, you are here to hear a story. And so because we are in agreement in that, we get to be in community in a particular way. And I think walking into this particular play, seeing these people enact in community with one another, I think that's the thing that translates across all audiences.
I love that,
love that.
Taji.
I
That
love
is
that.
it,
You know,
right? Because this is the metaphor.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, what's happening in the what's happening in the diner is the metaphor for what we're all trying to do in theater.
And Taji in rehearsal one day just put it very well, because she was saying that there's a character in the play that she takes care of, and what she did was differentiate the difference between just caring about somebody and actually taking care of them, and that there's a difference. You know, it's like I can care, I can send you my prayers and, you know, wishes for your, you know, for your good, but actually taking care of people is something different. And so when in the play, we actually see what it means to actually take care of somebody.
We watch you actually hear people, not, you know, like deeply receive people in the way. And what Wilson does to my eye and ear is just celebrate everyone's humanity to such an extraordinary
And you
degree.
watch people not hear each other too, which
Yeah.
I think, which I love, because like I think from an audience perspective, like I love when I'm watching a thing and I'm like, you just need to understand that this person is trying to say that, and because we have we're all bringing our individual humanity to a thing. You know, sometimes we get, like Gilbert says, we're talking cross purposes.
Yeah,
like we can't,
right.
so we get to watch people hear and not hear each other.
And your character really watches a lot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I mean, you do watch all the interactions at these tables and take it all in.
Yeah, I think that there's a real internalization that Risa happens, and there's a difference, I think, between like being observant and actually seeing someone. And I think Risa's doing a lot of seeing. And I think that's sort of a part of her labor. It is the physical labor of like running this restaurant, but it is also the emotional labor of like, I understand your position in the world, and I understand what you are bringing when you come in here, and so that is what I'm going to respond to. I'm not going to maybe respond to what you say, because maybe I didn't like what you said, but I'm responding to your positionality in the world and who you are, and who we are in relationship to one another.
It's wonderful. You've all had, to varying degrees, experience with August Wilson's work, and in your case, experience with August Wilson himself as well, with Mr. Wilson. Has there been something that has been particularly surprising to you on working on this play at this time in this theater? Is there something that you didn't expect, or something that deepened, or just what's your experience of this journey? And then I'll ask you what an audience might expect.
I'm not really sure how to put it, really. We were touching on something today, just on the break. And one of the ideas that I hadn't seen as much when I first read the play, that I'm recognizing more and more, is Mr. Wilson's understanding also of self-determination, that gets introduced in various ways, but one way it gets directly introduced as a character actually literally says, you know, something about, you know, you're talking about what you want and what you don't want, but you got to understand that the people who want one got one. And he goes on to say, you know, so you keep saying what you don't want, look what you're going to have in a few, you watch, see what you're going to have in a few years, but I'm paraphrasing. But when I understood about, you know, there's another layer that Mr. Wilson is introducing here that I think does have to do with self-determination. And like, okay, yeah, some things we have to, there are ways in which you have to think about what it is that you want and things that you can't entertain if you want what you want. And we kind of see that get played out in a few of the characters in terms of like, you know, who are after, you know, again, this, you know, getting what they deserve. But we see it played out in a way that I think is kind of instructive, which I
To
really
now, to all of us now. I
right?
hear that.
Because they're now one of the big words I hear repeatedly is like manifestation. You know what I mean? But it's just like, how do we manifest? I want to manifest. And it's like, this play is a lot about like manifestation on some real levels.
Absolutely.
And about and kind of in a way like how do you go about it and like and there's some real, like I said, instructive things I think that are in the play about that. But they're shown, I think, in Mr. Wilson's brilliant way through the characters' pursuits, through their lives and through their relationships that we see it, rather than kind of like
There's
this is
nothing
what
pedantic.
There's nothing
There
pedantic
is
about this
no
is what you got to
lecture
do.
here.
Oh, none at all.
We are just in the diner hearing,
Yeah.
getting to know extraordinary people and hearing their stories and feeling for them and wondering about all of what your next steps,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's, I did a production of this play and I played a different character. I played Hambone.
That's a very different role. Or not.
I don't want to say much.
Look
I don't want to say much.
You are
but,
wonderful.
But
Okay.
I don't want to say much, but like, it makes sense in the universe that I would be in the position to play Memphis. And I think that's, on the one hand, it's really amazing and a blessing learning so much, while also it's a lot to carry. And I feel like I'm using it.
But it's speaking to this time in your life.
And it's speaking to this time in my life.
Again, a little personal, but here you are. You run a theater in town.
Yeah.
You have a lot of civic responsibility, and you're playing a character who has a lot of civic responsibility. It's very moving. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, it's
What we've done to you.
Yeah.
But now you're making me think, though. I think anybody who ends up playing Memphis has to play Hambone first.
That's what I'm saying.
You gotta play Hambone first before you can play Memphis. That's interesting.
Yeah. That's why I was just like, when you were talking about just like that mirror, when we're talking about it, I was seeing it.
Yeah.
I was clocking it. What was interesting is I didn't clock it while I was playing Hambone.
Yeah.
But I clocked it when I started like reading.
I find it so moving, even hearing all of you as a company speak, is the sort of working your way through the Wilson canon.
Oh, for sure.
As artists, as actors, as directors, as designers, but particularly the actor's journey through the various ages and roles in Wilson. I mean, that is that is like Shakespeare, right? Where an actress will say she started as Juliet and she did Gertrude and then she does the nurse.
You're engaging the canon.
And it's the same here. You engage with the canon.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And the history of it. I mean, like we are all talking about, like when you also think about, like, who played that role.
Right.
Things like that. You're thinking about, like, oh, so you are also a part of a huge tradition of people. And I remember
great American acting.
Great American acting, And Mr. Wilson is so funny. I think he understood that. I was actually doing another piece. Joe Turner's Come and Gone, but I was doing it in Ghana. And Mr. Wilson found out, and they interviewed him, and he said, well, they said, well, so what do you think about them doing that? He said, well, I'm glad they're doing it, and if they like that, I got some more for them. And it's an understanding, like, no. I want you to get the whole thing. Don't just do one. Do the whole canon, because it's rich. There's so much
and
there.
they're talking to each other. The plays they're in.
They're talking to each other, And so when you think about it in that way, it's like, this is a rich canon to be involved with and to engage and to think about, like kind of like I said, the history of folks who have done this work, and we're blessed to have, people who have done like so many other
It's an
actors.
extraordinary
They have done the work. They've done it. And so it's like the Wilson Warriors. We got them in our cast.
I like that. Can we get that on a shirt? The Wilson Warriors. That's pretty good.
Because you've done it, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think this is my first Wilson play. Yeah.
Welcome to the canon.
Thank you.
That's really cool.
It really feels like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
And it feels like similarly like a thing that I had to earn. There's when I was in grad school, one of my least and also favorite professors would say, like, I challenge you with hard work because I think you can do it. I challenge you with hard work because I think you are worthy of hard work. And this play is hard work in the best way possible, and it is such a gift and a blessing to have to rise to the occasion. And it is calling on all of my professional and creative experience thus far to show up and see this character, to see this work, to see this production in its totality. And I think it's, yeah, like I said, I think it's just such a great blessing to have the opportunity to, you know, join that number and say, yeah, I've gotten an opportunity to do this work. Yeah.
Well, thank you, three. You had a long rehearsal day. I know. I'm so grateful for this time. You don't want to miss this show. I mean, I know I say that a lot because I don't think you should miss any of our shows at Hartford Stage, but Two Trains Running is an exceptional piece of poetry, of active writing, with world-class artists here in Hartford telling this amazing story. We hope you'll join us. We are January 23rd through February 16th here at Hartford Stage. As always, you can get tickets at hartfordstage.org. You can just email me and I'll make sure you get there. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Melia.
August
Yeah,
Wilson
thank
needs
you.
to be seen. More than that, he needs to be heard. He needs to be in your heart and soul. Thanks to these extraordinary artists. Nos vemos en el teatro. We'll see you at the theater. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. See you soon. Thank you, thank you, thank you.